So this morning, we're going to continue our series of being wired different. We kicked that off last week where we looked at the different ways that we as men and women are different, because we are different. We like different things. We like to do things in different ways, I will say. So I'll give you an example. If Henley, who's on our front row here, if at home, she's my daughter, teenage daughter, if she were to come up to me and she were to ask me, how should I do this? Whatever that thing might be, I would give her an answer. And there's a really good chance in our house that she would go, oh, okay. And then go straight to Denise and say, how, Mom, should I do this? And Denise is going to give her a different way that they're probably going to come to an agreement on versus the way I would do it. Why? Because we're wired differently, right? As men and women, we're wired different. And I've come to learn in my household that my solutions are not usually the solutions that get picked. Why? Because I'm outnumbered by people who are wired very differently from how I am wired. As men, women, we are just wired differently, designed that way by a divine creator. We are wired differently. But the important part is that we are wired on purpose for a purpose. So God, in his original design, he created man, who was Adam. He created him from the dust of the ground, which tells us that God can even take the smallest, most insignificant, mundane things and turn them into masterpieces. He creates Adam from the dust. He forms him together with his hands, specifically, intricately. He breathes his breath into him, giving him life, but not just life, giving him a soul. And then he goes and he gives Adam a purpose, to be in relationship with him. You see, for men and for women, that's your purpose. That's our purpose. That's a purpose for your life. It's why you exist, to be in relationship with God. You are wired to be in relationship with God. Each one of us wired that way. If you're a woman in the room, you are wired to be in relationship with God. If you're a man here in the room, guess what? You are wired to be in relationship with God as well. It's one of the few ways that it seems like sometimes we as men and women are wired the same. God has created us to commune, to be in community, to be in relationship with him first and foremost. And here's the thing. It's not that God is trying to be selfish in demanding that he be first in your life. It's not him being mean. The reason he says, be in relationship with me first, it's so everything else in your life can flow from having him being first in your life. Your other relationships outside of you and him, your spouse, your kids, your coworkers, your friends, your neighbors, all of those relationships are designed to work from an overflow of your relationship with God. But when we get that out of order, guess what happens? Everything begins to get all messed up. All of those relationships, when we don't have God first, that relationship first, all of those other relationships get messed up. Which means none of those relationships are what they're supposed to be. They're meant to be by God. You see, God has designed our relationships. And he's designed us, he's created us to be in relationships. But the thing is, we're pretty much the best at being the worst at relationships, right? We're wired to be in them. We're created to be in them. And yet, we mess them up what feels like all of the time. And when we mess things up, we think things like, why are women so difficult? Right? Why are men such pigs? You know? I'm sure. Sometimes though, when we're honest, sometimes we have this thought. When our relationships are not what we want them to be, sometimes we have this thought. what's wrong with me? Have you ever had that thought? Have you asked that question? In your relationships when they're struggling with your spouse, your kids, your best friend, your boss, whatever it is, have you asked that question, what is wrong with me? Why can I not communicate with my kids? Why are they always mad at me? Why am I always mad at them? Why does my boss look like ignore me? Why can't my husband just understand me and get me? What is wrong with me? And I will tell you, we are each wired uniquely and differently. You are you, I am me. God has created us and wired us individually and uniquely, but with that, we have some similarities. I have similar wiring to other men in this room. There are things that we're going to relate to automatically. The same goes for you women in the room. You all have things that you relate to that us guys are probably just not going to understand it. So it's not a problem what's wrong with you. It's understanding the wiring. We are each different and yet we're similar. So I want to help illustrate this. I want to show some pictures in a video. Last week we watched a couple of guys, if you were here and you remember, a couple of guys who were trying to hit golf balls into a dryer. Right? And so they're swinging and they got a dryer set up of, however far away, and they're trying to hit it into it, which makes complete sense to most of us men here, but not so much sense to the ladies. So I want to help reinforce how we are just differently. And I'm going to use some of our teenagers as examples. I want us to look at a couple of pictures. This goes back to church camp. We went to 2 church camps last year. This went back to church camp last summer. We've got 2 different cabins. Girls stay in their room, or boys, we stay in our cabin. And I can tell you the things that took place in these 2 cabins. We're just a little bit different. So Taylor, if you'd show that first picture, let's look at some of these girls. Here's Avery. They're hanging out. They're just on their bed. They're just thinking about contemplating the morning. Go to the next one. They're happy, they're smiling, like look how happy they are, right? Taylor, if you go to the next one, like look at them, they're snuggled up. Look here, Henley's got a Bible on her lap, they're excited for the day. It's like just like peaceful and perfect. Now Taylor, if you would show the video that's next.
Big country, you got it.
Hey, right there by Austin.
Now, that's at like 11:30 at night. One. That was not the only night that happened. That was all week long. Now, there was a crowd around. They were crowding around. We go to southeast Missouri. You might have heard at the very beginning, "Come on, big country, you can do it." That was what they called the blonde-headed kid. And so we live in that world for a week, which is very different than the world we live in here. That was all week long. It was just constant wrestling. Now, Edison's a great wrestler, 19-0 this season, right? Finished up his... Ranked in the state, I think undefeated officially at camp as well for the week. I keep telling people, I don't know how many weeks of church camp I have left in me, because this is what we do. It's like what happens. I think I figured it up. I've spent like 8 months of my life just at church camp. But I believe in it. I love it. It wears me out, but there's nothing else like it. A shameless plug for church camp. We'll be raising money this spring. Has the power to change young lives and hearts. And I told our youth group this morning in Sunday school class, I don't know why, I've literally thought about church camp every single day since last church camp. And that's unusual for me. I love it, but I don't think about it all the time. I've been thinking about it just random times. And I believe God wants to do something big at church camp this year with our teenagers. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's going to be, but I'm excited for it. But did you notice how the girls stayed nice and calm? I know that they're not calm all the time. But at least they were like calm when they knew they were taking a picture. Our boys, like, this is what we do. I don't know why we do this stuff. I don't know why when we get together, like, hey, let's wrestle. Let's see who can like pin each other first, right? And we'll have lined up to do it, right? Lined up like out the door and down the hallway. And we get together and it's just like, now it's time for feats of strength. We're just going to see who's the strongest. And it's this kind of stuff that makes Denise know deep down she cannot have handled having boys. Like, she knows that. Because we're different. We're weird. Us guys, we're goofy. We're kind of smelly. We can be obnoxious. We can be annoying. And you're stuck with us, right? You ladies are stuck with us. And since you are stuck with us, and since we're meant to be in relationships, all kinds of different relationships, it's important that we dig into more of how we are wired. And so if you weren't here last week, I encourage you to go back. You can always watch our messages on our YouTube page. We talked about God has created and wired us differently as men and women, going all the way back to the Garden of Eden. He's designed us differently, physically different, emotionally different, and even with different purposes. And towards the end of the message last week, we looked at 5 common ways both us guys tend to be wired and 5 common ways that you women tend to be wired. Why are we wired differently? Why didn't God just wire us all the same? It's because we were never meant to be complete on our own. So if I have a carbon copy of myself in every relationship, then none of my relationships would be complete. I need what the other side brings to the table. In marriage, I need that. In parenting, I need that. In workplaces, we need it. We need what the other side brings and has to offer. We need their wiring. We need to be different. Now, does that mean that I'm telling you married men in the room to go and be friends with all the ladies at work? Best friends, because we're wired differently. We need them. That's not what I'm saying, all right? Ladies, I did not just tell your man to go and do that. You can't say, but pastor said so. But we do need each other. Our groups need each other. Our teams need each other. An all-male team in the workplace is going to be missing some pieces, right? We'll be thinking that we don't need the other side on our team, but we would be wrong. Ladies, if you're thinking, I don't need no man in my life, I don't need him on my team, we're good. Anything we can do, anything you can do, we can do better. You would be wrong. The ladies are like, that's exactly why we don't need a man on our team. He's always going to tell us that we're doing it wrong, right? But we stink at relationships. And it's because we focus on the differences as being bad instead of being what we need. We were never meant to be complete on our own, which means women, unfortunately, you need us men. Men, we also need women. So today we're going to focus on learning about how and why us men are wired the way that God has wired us. Why? Well, for us men, it's important that we understand how we're wired. But more importantly than that, understanding men's wiring so we can use it to fulfill the purposes that God has designed and created us for. Ladies, this message is not just for the men. This is not permission like for you to tune out and do whatever you want for the next however long this message is going to last. Instead, this is your opportunity to, 1, help understand why we do the things that we do. And 2, gain an understanding of what a healthy and godly set of expectations should be for the men in your life or the potential men in your life and in those relationships. The good news for us is that God has given us a blueprint for everything, which means a blueprint for what He's designed and what He has called us to be as men and women and how we are meant to work together in our relationships with each other. So if you would join me, let's go to Genesis chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6 is going to help us gain a better understanding of how God has designed us as men and what He wants that to produce in our lives. While you're turning there, let's recap just a little bit from last week. So last week we looked at Genesis chapter 2, where we see God creating Adam and then Eve. And so He creates them separately in different ways and even with different purposes. However, His goal in creating both of them was for them to have each other, to be in relationship, first with Him, then with each other. Now, in the Bible, a lot happens between Genesis 2 and Genesis 6. Adam and Eve, they mess up. They sin. Sin enters into the world, our world, and it changes everything, both for them in the moment, for their future, but also for us. Here's a side note. Maybe someone needs to hear this today. Sin always changes things. No matter how small you think the sin is, no matter how inconsequential you think that sin might be, sin always, always, always changes things. And not just for you, but for those around you as well. Adam and Eve, They sinned, and it changed things. It brought in death. It brought separation from God. It put a curse on the earth, pain and childbearing for Eve and for women, and removal for them from the Garden of Eden. So Adam and Eve, they left. They started a family. Only their family had a lot of dysfunction, just like ours can have a lot of dysfunction, right? From there, the world begins to get populated. Cities get built. Ways to do things get discovered. Languages get formed. You can read all about that in the first few chapters of Genesis. And people do people, things, and stuff, which means people messed up a lot. They messed up their surroundings, their relationships with each other, and their relationships with God. And that's where we pick up in Genesis chapter 6. So we're going to look at Genesis 6, verses 5 through 11. Genesis 6, 5 through 11. When the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was deeply grieved. Then the Lord said, I will wipe mankind, whom I created, off the face of the earth, together with the animals, creatures that crawl, all the birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. However, Noah found favor with the Lord. The page is stuck. There we go. These are the family records of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. I think it's easy for us to think of Noah and the flood and the ark as, in a lot of ways, just this children's Bible story, right? I mean, this is the stuff that, like, nurseries get decorated with. You have the ark and all the different animals, like their heads sticking out of the windows of the ark. And, you got like a lion and some monkeys there, and you got like a giraffe's head like way above like everything else up there, and there's like a rainbow over it, and everybody's happy, and everybody's getting along. And when you like at the front of it, you have this old guy with white hair and a long white beard, and he's always like just as happy as can be. And that can make some great decoration for like a nursery, a baby's room. The only problem is it doesn't exactly paint the most accurate of pictures of what is happening here. When we think about this story, we think about the animals and the ark and the flood and what it would have been like to be on the ark, and were there really, all of the animals, pairs of them, and how would it all have worked, God bringing them there, and where would they all have fit? And there's lots of interesting questions to ask and things to wonder about. But here's the thing that I think we often miss. The world was a terrible, terrible place. Leading up to the flood, the world had become an absolutely awful place. Why? What had caused it to be so bad? And it's us. Like, we happened. People happened. And I say this a lot in our sermons jokingly, but a little bit of truth to it. We can be the worst sometimes. We can be the absolute worst, and it's important that we recognize just how bad the people had become leading up to the flood. Because the passage that we just read told us that when God looked at the people, when he saw their actions and he searched their hearts, he came to a conclusion. They're the worst. It told us that we were so bad and so wicked that every inclination that man had, meaning every thought, every desire, every idea, was nothing but evil. And that did something to God. It did something to God. Our actions do stuff to God. It caused him to regret making us, and it caused him to be deeply grieved. Have you ever been in a relationship that was great at first, and then things changed? A friendship, a coworker, potentially a romantic relationship, and it all started out great. I mean, it was just perfect. And then things changed. That person started to change. They started to do things you didn't like, eventually became different, even to the point maybe where you thought to yourself, I wish I'd never met that person. I wish I never met him. I wish I had never met her. You know what we're talking about, those relationships? Here's one of the reasons that the writer of the book of Genesis, which was Moses, chose to include this little aspect about God, that he regretted something, that he wished something was different, is to tell us that God relates to us. God relates to us. Jesus relates to us, especially when it comes to relationships. God knows relationships are hard because he's been wounded by the ones that he loves. God looked at his creation, this crowning jewel of his creation, which is us, and he saw our evil and he saw our wickedness, that it was all that we wanted to do, all we thought about doing, all we desired to do, and God was deeply grieved, so much so that he regretted making us. Did you know that God can have regrets? Just like us. He's saying, I wanted this to be perfect, but they messed it all up. Everything that was supposed to have turned out different. How could they do this? Why would they do this? Friends, it's important that we know that God relates to us in our relationships. He's been loved by us. He's been rewarded, been honored in his relationships with us, but he has also been incredibly hurt and disappointed and rejected and wounded in his relationships with us, far more than we ever have been. And friends, as much as we like to think that we're never the ones who do the hurting in our relationships, we have been guilty of it. In your relationships, sometimes you're the one that others say, I wish I'd never met him or her. And then there are times when someone says that, you say that, and there's times that they say it about you. We've all been there. We've all failed at relationships. We've hurt people. We've disappointed them. We've walked out on them. We've cursed them to their faces and behind their backs. We've broken trust. We've said things that we can't take back, done lots of damage. Sometimes we are the ones that others wish that they had never met. In our relationships, both with people and with God, here's an incredible goal to aspire to never cause others to regret that they loved me, to never cause them to be grieved, to never cause them to wish that they had never met me, to never cause God to have feelings of regret about creating me. In other words, to live a life like Noah, in a world and a culture and a society where everyone was completely wicked and only had desires and thoughts for evil. God saw Noah and found favor in him. Verse 8 says, again, Noah was righteous, a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. God was ready to destroy everything. Everything he had created. He regretted all of it, and he was super upset about it. Have you ever been there? You're ready to blow it all up, right? You're done. Have you said those words in some of your relationships? I'm done. God was ready to be done. Then he remembered Noah. Friends, never underestimate what will change when you are righteous. When you are righteous, Noah's righteousness saved everything, saved God's creation. His righteousness saved us from being wiped off the face of the earth. It's how and why we're still around. As people, we are called to be righteous first. Men, hear me on this. We are called to be righteous first, above and ahead of everything and everyone else. As people, we're called to be righteous, which is just simply right living with God. Men, we are called to be righteous. We are called to righteousness. We're called to it, yet we struggle with it. Now, not just men and women struggle with it. We struggle with it in different ways. But men, we have been created and called by God to do specific things in our lives, to be specific things in our lives, to specific people in our lives. And you cannot do those things. You cannot be who you were called to be and created to be if you are not in a right relationship with God first. Men, we are wired to have tendencies that lean towards certain things. Things like action, things like direction, responsibility. We like to do things. We like to work. We like to problem solve. We like to fix things and take care of things. We like to build, we like to plan and accomplish. And those are all great things. We're designed, wired to do these things, but only when they're in alignment with righteous living with God. Don't underestimate what will change in your life through your righteous living. Do you want your family to be different? You want things to be different in your marriage, with your kids, your job, your friends. Change that we desire in those ways. Change is ignited when righteousness gets activated. What needs to change? Let's talk about some of those things. Did some research this week. 1 in 5 men have problems with drinking. So much so to the level that it is actually hazardous to their health. 1 in 5 men report having used drugs in ways that risk harm to their health and others. 1 in 10 men show patterns of compulsive gambling, and that number is going up fast. I don't know if you've watched TV lately, shows. Now that gambling is approved and legal in Missouri and all this stuff, it's like every commercial. Think about that. Think about how they're affording that commercial and the people who are in them. 1 in 3 men report struggling with pornography use. And church, these are all reported numbers, right? Which means, in reality, it's much higher than this. But the world tells us these are not problems. It's just what guys do, right? It's how we're wired. Go have a beer, some drinks after work when you're watching the game, or really whenever you feel like it. Are you stressed out? Are you anxious? Are you worried? You can't sleep, need to relax? Go get some gummies, smoke some weed. Do what you need to do. Do you need to blow off some steam? Maybe even walk away with some extra money? Place some bets, right? Check out some girls while you're at it. With everything you have going on and you are dealing with, we're men. We have a lot going on. You deserve it. This is what the world tells us, right? And I'm sure that we have men in this room who are struggling with one or more or even all of these things. Verse 9, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. If you want to change your marriage, your family, your purpose, you will ignite change, that change, when righteousness is activated. Noah's righteousness stood out against his culture. Men, we must, as Christians, we must stand out against our culture. Righteous living changed everything for Noah and his family, and it must come first for your life because everything else hinges on it. Your marriage, it'll never be what God has designed it to be if you aren't living righteously with God first. Your family, it'll never be what God has designed it to be if you aren't living righteously. Same goes for your job, your friendships, your involvement in your community, here at church, your very purpose. None of those will be what God wants them to be if you aren't living a righteous life first and foremost. Now that goes for you women as well, but here's why it's important for us men. God has created us to do a few things. He's created us to be leaders, but not just any leaders. Men, he's created us to be spiritual leaders. You see, men are designed to set the spiritual direction before we set any other direction. What does that mean? Men, we set the directions that our homes go in. We set the directions that our relationships go in, that our families go in. If I am distant as a husband, my marriage will go in a very unfulfilling direction. If I'm not present with my kids will seek out approval, wisdom, and direction from all the wrong voices in all the wrong places. If I'm fully present and engaged in my marriage and with my kids, but I don't set a spiritual direction in my marriage and with my kids, then I will have failed them. Why? Because I didn't fulfill the purpose that God has given me as a man to be a spiritual leader. Men, we are called to be spiritual leaders. Men, you are called to be the spiritual leader of your family. It's not your wife's responsibility, it's yours. It's how God has designed things. Can I show you how this works? Some statistical proof of why this matters so much and that this is part of God's design. This isn't me being sexist. God has designed his creation on purpose and with a purpose. Let's say some kids come to church. We do VBS every year. Say they come to church that week of VBS. They have a great time. And they keep coming to church on their own. No parents. Maybe they come across the street, down the road. The likelihood that they continue coming to church as an adult, having come as children on their own, is under 10%. Single digits. Let's say that some kids come to church with their mom. We have a lot here at church. A lot of single moms. Can we give a hand to our single moms? I know we've been talking about men. Can we give a hand to our single moms? They deserve it. We have a lot of single moms. Moms, we are here for you. We know that it's tough. And here's a tough stat for us today. When it's just the mom that comes to church with her kids, only 15% of those kids stay in church as adults. Now, as a sidebar to this overall message, church, God has sent us a lot of single moms, which means he's entrusted us with a lot of single moms, which then means he's given us a great responsibility. And it's my goal, our church's goal, through our kids program downstairs, our awesome youth group, our leaders and volunteers in these programs, but also just you, us in this church, that we step into the gap and change that number. That we step into the gap and change that percentage. It's a challenge I believe that God has placed before us. Now, when just a dad brings the kids, listen to this number. It goes up to as high as 67% of kids stay in church as adults. Moms, does that mean that you are less than dads to your kids? It doesn't. But it does mean there's a difference between us and the roles that we play. We are wired differently as each other, but also in the eyes of our kids. We influence and teach and mold them in different ways. When one of the kids hurts themselves, they run to Denise. We're wired that way. Nurturer, caregiver. Men, you're the spiritual leaders of your family, for better or for worse. And just an FYI, when both parents come to church and are faithful, the number skyrockets well past 70%. Genesis 7:1 says, "Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." He told Noah. He told Noah to be the leader of his family. Does that mean the women of the family are less? It doesn't. God has wired and designed men to be the spiritual leaders of their families. Noah's obedience leads his family into salvation. Salvation from destruction, right? God is going to destroy nearly all of his creation. His relationship with his wife, with his sons, with their wives as a spiritual leader leading up to that, it meant that they were willing to follow him in his spiritual leadership. His faith covered more than just himself. Men, your faith covers more than just yourself. This means that your life must look different from the world. You cannot be a man of God and a man of this world at the same time. One or the other. Because with any kind of leadership, it's always about more than just yourself. It's about leading those whom God has entrusted to your care. Sometimes that's physically, it's always spiritually. You see, the enemy knows this as well. He knows how God has designed things. He knows exactly how God has designed things. Why do you think we struggle so much in our relationships? Why do you think men cheat on their wives? Why do you think men aren't present? Why do you think men struggle to be leaders in their homes? Because the enemy does everything he can to destroy families. Men, your faith covers more than just yourself. So it's time then for us to stop being selfish, to stop putting yourself first, and know that the relationships that God has called you to lead require you to sacrifice. God has called us to be strong, and that is a strength that protects, and it leads, and it also serves. Guys, the world out there will tell us a lot of things about what it means to be a man. What we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. And nearly all of it will be the opposite or in the opposite order of what God calls us and tells us to be. The world will tell you to be tough. God tells us to surrender. The world will tell you to work hard and to provide, and God agrees with that. We're called to be providers, but not first. We live righteously first. We lead spiritually second. We fulfill our role as providers after that, which means jobs can't be first, money can't be first, providing can't be first. Genesis 6:22 said Noah did everything just as God had commanded him. He built the ark, which means he provided for his family. Before that, though, he had to listen to God, right? Before that even, he had to live righteously so God could talk to him. Before he could provide an ark for his family to survive the destruction that was going to come, Noah lived a righteous life before God. Do you know what this meant for Noah? Noah built an ark, provided for his family, long before the storm ever came. Men, we are called to be providers, both physically but also spiritually, to prepare before the storm even comes. Denise, if you would come in our time of response. Friends, if you would stand with me. Our response time is simply a time that we take what God has presented to us, words that we've said, passages of Scripture that we've looked at, take it and ask God, God, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? Some of you in the room are dads or fathers or husbands or supervisors, different ways. Some of you are grandparents, grandfathers. You've been entrusted with grandchildren. What does that mean? What does that mean for a relationship with your kids, with your grandkids? Your job's not done just because you've gotten older. Some of you young guys aren't in those relationships yet. What are we going to do about it now to make sure one day we're who we're supposed to be in those relationships? Friends, if you would bow your heads and close your eyes. What is God speaking to you today? Maybe he's caused you to realize, I've been having the wrong things first in my life. I've been struggling to live a righteous life before God. And I don't want that anymore. I don't want that for me, but I don't want that for my family. I don't want that for my future family. I don't want that for my friendships. Friends, each one of us, men, women, we're called to live a righteous life before God. Maybe we've been trying to have it both ways, a foot in the world, a foot in with God. And he says, friend, it's all or nothing with me. I'm that holy. I'm that righteous, is what God tells us. Can't do the things that I want to do in and through and with your life when there's sin present, being lived out. Father, this morning, Lord, whatever you've spoken to us, maybe you brought an awareness that you're missing in our lives. Maybe we have ones here in the room who haven't accepted Jesus as their Savior. Lord, that you loved us enough, you loved them enough to send your one and only Son to die for us, to take on our sins, so we can even be in a relationship with you, to span that gap that's so wide that sin creates. Maybe you're saying, take that step. Put your faith, hope, and trust in me. It's been in other people and other things, and they've all disappointed and all let you down. Now it's time for Jesus. Friends, maybe he's saying it's time to make some repairs, some changes, some differences in your life so it can make the differences in your family's life. Father, whatever you're speaking to us, I pray that we would not miss the moment to take care of it today, because you brought it to us in this hour, at this time. Friends, over these next few moments, if there's anything that we can join together in prayer, I invite you to come to the altar and we'll pray.